Hello everyone, welcome to yet another session of the daily news analysis by SRIRAM'S IAS, where we take up the important articles featuring in the Hindu newspaper and break them down for our understanding from the examination point of view. So let's start today's discussion by taking the important articles from the newspaper which are on our screens, and let's take up the first article for the day. The first article which appears in the newspaper reads, "Not Centers of Learning Yet." Now this is an important editorial appearing in the newspaper pertaining to the Anganwadi centers or the Anganwadi scheme which was launched by the Ministry of Child and Women Development. So this ministry which had launched the Anganwadi scheme, this editorial talks about the development and the journey of the Anganwadi centers and scheme up until now, and what are the challenges that exists in the road ahead for this Anganwadi scheme, and how has the performance been for the Anganwadi centers. So let's dive deep into this issue. So this topic would become important for us from the point of view of GS2, where we study the important schemes. Then since it's a social scheme for women and children, it can also cover aspects in GS1 society. So it is covered under these topics. So let's start with the Anganwadi scheme, or what are Anganwadi centers? Now, what do we mean by these Anganwadi centers? What are these places for? So, to start the journey for these Anganwadi centers, let's understand the importance of tackling or attending to the health of young children and pregnant mothers and lactating mothers. So, in the rural setup in the villages, whenever the mothers get pregnant or they are lactating, it becomes of utmost importance to take care of the mothers, and when the children are born, to take care of their initial health activities. So with respect to their immunization, their nutrition, and their preschooling as well. So all of these activities which are of extreme importance to not just the mothers and their children, but they being the human resource capital for the country when they grow up, they become extremely important. So this scheme was launched, which was earlier known as the Integrated Child Development Service, or the ICDS scheme. This was launched in the year 1975 to tackle exactly this issue and to take care of the health and nutrition of the pregnant and lactating mothers and the newly born children. So it was providing for supplementary nutrition, immunization and preschool education to the children, and a popular flagship program of the government which was launched in 1975, and it is one of the world's largest programs providing for an integrated package of services for the holistic development of the child. So what kind of a scheme this is? As we saw, this is a scheme coming under the Ministry of Women and Child. So it's a centrally sponsored scheme. Now what do we know about centrally sponsored scheme? We know that there are two types of scheme. One is a central sector scheme. This is a type of scheme of which total funding is done by the central government. But whenever a scheme is a centrally sponsored scheme, which means that partial funding of the scheme would be done by the center and other half of the funding would be done by the states. So similar is the case with this scheme, which is implemented by the state governments and union territories. All components of this ICDS except one component, that is the supplementary nutrition program. So there are various components in the ICDS scheme. So all components other than this one is financed through a 60-40 ratio. That is 60% funding would be given by the center and 40% would have to be given by the state, and the scheme as a whole would be implemented by the state governments at the state level. So this is the setup of the scheme, and it is universally covering all the districts of the country. So currently, as the article tells us, it serves over 30 million children, right, in the age group of 3 to 6 in 1.3 million centers across the country. So there are around 13 lakh Anganwadi centers around the country which serve around 30 million children who are in the age group of age 3 to 6. This is the age group wherein they attain the preschool education. So this is the coverage of the scheme right now for these children. And then initially which this scheme was named as the ICDA scheme, it was renamed as the Anganwadi Services Scheme. So this is the backdrop of Anganwadi services. Now, apart from these centers, what is the objective of these centers? As we have seen in brief manner, we'll take a look at what are the objectives of this scheme. So first is, as I said, these centers are being instituted in the rural setup and all the districts of the country, especially to take care of the health of the pregnant and lactating mothers and the newly born children and all the allied activities that come along with them at that age group. So, to improve the nutritional and health status of children in the age group of 0 to 6 years is the primary objective. So, the work is going on their nutrition, health, then to lay the foundation for proper psychological, physical and social development of the child. So, it just not takes care of the physical health of the child, but also takes measures to build proper psychological, physical and social development of the child. And how does it do so? These Anganwadi centers also become the ground for preschool education. That is how this is done. Then to reduce the incidence of mortality, morbidity, malnutrition and school dropout. These are also the objective, and to achieve effective coordination of policy and implementation amongst the various departments to promote child development, right? So this also becomes a coordinating point. How so? Because this one-stop center provides a host of services pertaining to physical health, other kinds of services, nutrition facilities, preschool facilities. So this becomes a one-stop center and therefore becomes a spot for effective coordination for various policies for women and children, and they can be effectively implemented as well. Then to enhance the capability of the mother to look after the normal health and nutritional needs of the child through proper nutrition and health education. So in a way, these Anganwadi centers share the load of the mothers, where the mother, if without these centers, would have to take care of the physical health, the emotional health and all other activities which are important at that age group by herself. These services and these Anganwadi centers become a point where they can aid the mother to take care of all these services and thereby give a lot of free time also to the mother, since all the other services are being taken care in the Anganwadi centers. So these are the primary objectives of the Anganwadi centers and the Anganwadi scheme which was launched by the Union government. So who are the beneficiaries under this? As we saw, children in the age group of 0 to 6 years, then the pregnant women and lactating mothers. These are the primary beneficiaries of this scheme. Then, what are the services under ICDS? As we were talking about that this is a one-stop center for many services. So, majorly 6 services are provided under this scheme. What are these 6 services? First is about nutrition. So, supplementary nutrition would be given under this in the Anganwadi centers. So, take-home meals, all the important nutritious meals that are important for the child, they can be accessed from the Anganwadi centers. Then preschool and non-formal education. This is the talking point about the editorial article, which talks about a specific service or a specific tool that the Anganwadi service offers, that of preschool and non-formal education. So the article will, as we will see what the article will talk about, talks about this single aspect. The other aspect is nutrition and health education. That becomes another service. Then immunization. So we see that all the vaccines, important vaccines that are to be given to children are also given in these centers only. Then health checkup and other referral services. So as we can see, these become the important centers wherein children and their mothers can come for their health status checkup, taking care of their health, taking care of the nutrition for the mother and the child, and also granting preschool education to these children. So these are holistic centers of taking care of the health of the mothers and children and of also preschool and early age learning, or what we call early childhood care services. ECCS is the term given to such preschool learning, which is known as early childhood care services. So all these 3 of these 6 services, that is immunization, health checkup and referral services, are related to health and provided through National Health Mission and public health infrastructure. and the services are offered at the Anganwadi centers through Anganwadi workers and the Anganwadi helpers. So the personnel who are recruited in these centers to implement these schemes are known as Anganwadi workers and the Anganwadi helpers. So these are the background information and the holistic information about what the scheme is about. Now let's come to what are the issues that the author in the article has pointed out with these, especially the learning center aspect of these Anganwadi centers when it comes to imparting preschool education in these Anganwadi centers. So the authors in this article point out that the intended benefit that was to be given to these young children aged from 0 to 6, which is a very nimble age and a very critical age where the brain is developing, and that is why the important skill sets, the primary fundamental skill sets that of learning language, learning numerical skills, all these foundational skills, imparting them in the most correct manner is a very critical step to do. And that is why these centers are very important, but these authors point out that these centers have not been very successful in doing so. How so? It says that there is very low attendance in these Anganwadis. The recent NFHS survey, the National Family Health Survey, it pointed out that in 2019-2020, less than 15% of the 5-year-olds attended any primary preschool at all. So which says that these services which were intended for the primary kids aged from 0 to 5, they were not taking use of this. And the authors point out that the reason for this is that the intended, one can say that the way this education should be imparted, it is not being done in that way. For example, teaching is not focused on imparting English language education. As we know, everywhere in the country, be it in the rural setup or in the urban setup, parents know that education is the means for their children and themselves to uplift themselves, to improve in their order of social mobility. So therefore, education is very important, and in order to excel in the real world, the proficiency, or at least starting with the imparting of English language education, is very important. And the authors highlight that this is exactly what is not being imparted in these Anganwadi centers, and apart from that, education in local language, which does not really make the parents of these children feel satisfied that this is the quality education being given in these preschools that is being done. That is why it is resulting into low attendance. So first issue is about not imparting education in the English language, which is a very critical step that has to happen at that level. And therefore, what is happening? Low attendance, and these kids who are from the age of 0 to 6 are shifting to private preschools. And these private preschools, according to the authors, are also not of great quality, which are focusing on rote learning and memorization of these letters and numbers. So the intended benefit, or the kind of outcome that the government wants from these kids to develop as fundamental skills, that is not happening. So as a way forward, the authors of the article are suggesting that the needs and the feedback of the parents should be taken, and education should be imparted as basic English education should be inculcated from young age to remove intimidation of the language. We see this with a lot of kids where if they are not taught English from a young age, there is a certain intimidation with learning of the language, and it becomes to learn that language in the later ages. So this is what the authors want to intervene at, and want to say that since a young age only, English education should be imparted. Then apart from these fundamental language skills, teaching basic math skills in simple interactive manner to remove phobia of maths should also be done. And when this will be done, where kids are easily kids are comfortably able to learn maths without having to develop a fear of it, it would automatically increase the chances of students of India succeeding in the STEM fields. What are the STEM fields? What we call the science, technology, engineering and mathematics fields. STEM fields are said to be the upcoming most important fields when it comes to the research and development and newer inventions. So this would increase the chances in succeeding in these fields. And then the authors suggest that regular Shiksha Chaupas or what we call the parent-teacher meetings should be conducted so that the parents can themselves see what kind of an education is being imparted, and at the same time their feedback is also taken by the teachers so that an effective coordination is done and the needs of the parents are also met in these centers. And eventually these centers who are facing from low attendance, and only 15% of the 5-year-olds are attending these centers, these Anganwadi centers, which can become such holistic centers of not just learning for these 0 to 6-year-olds, but a great source of managing their health, their nutrition and their overall development in such a critical age. Only when these interventions are done and these Anganwadi centers are fully equipped, the dream of developing these 0 to 5-year-olds can really take place. So this was a discussion with respect to the Anganwadi centers and the issues surrounding it. With this, let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, "A center state skew further widened." Now this is also an important article featuring in the newspaper with respect to the center and state financial relations. Now how? So as we can see, since the past many months, there has been a tussle going on between the center and the states in the manner such as since the last 2 weeks there was a Niti Aayog meeting wherein the states flagged off a major concern that the states are not getting their share of divisible pool of taxes which was to be given to them. So they flagged off this concern. Then as we know that the pandemic occurred and the fiscal situation of the states further declined, where the sources of revenue that the states had to earn money declined, and therefore these sources of earning money for the states is going down. But at the same time, the state's responsibility to carry out works is ever increasing, and that is why this creates for an issue to analyze as to what exactly is the status of between the center and state and their financial relations, as to how much is the center delegating to the state in terms of funds, how much is the state getting, and what kind of work the state is doing. So the article in this aspect highlights this issue by taking data from the Finance Commission and the Comptroller and Auditor General that we know as CAG reports. So from these reports, the article takes up data and highlights the relationship between the center and the state with respect to their finances. So let's take a look at these data one by one. First up is about the major or the primary allocation about what is the responsibility of carrying out works between center and state and what is the devolution of the taxes. So it is important to note over here that the Constitution grants the union government more revenue raising powers while the states are tasked to undertake most of the development and welfare related responsibilities. So this is the first important point for us to understand, that according to the Constitution, the union government or the center has more power to collect taxes or to raise revenue, but at the same time more responsibility of taking or implementing development and welfare related activities are given to whom? The state governments. So this forms as first imbalance, where the money raising power is with the center, but the responsibility of implementing the works is with the state. Therefore, according to the 15th Finance Commission, which is the latest Finance Commission, this is the constitutional body, Finance Commission, which decides how much of the taxes should be taken by the center and how much should be given to the states. So this 15th Finance Commission's report in 2019, the union government raised 62.7% of the total resources raised by the union government and states, while states had borne 62.4% of the aggregate expenditure. So the first data that we need to understand from here is that the majority portion of collecting the taxes or keeping the revenue was with the center, which says that 62% of the total taxes that was collected by the center, but 62.4% of the total expenditure made on the development works was done by the state. So as the first chart shows, aggregate resources raised, 62% is with the center, majority is with the center, minority is with the states. But when expenditure is concerned with, which means that how much is the development or welfare related work done by the authorities. So the expenditure incurred is more with the states as compared to the center. Now this is the first imbalance which we should be able to see, that the center has more power to collect taxes and the state as a matter of imbalance does not have that much power to raise taxes, but has equally more responsibility to implement these works. So this is the first point of data that the article shows us. Then a logical suggestion that one might have from this is that if the states are having to implement more activities, the state of taxes, the share of taxes that the state should be getting, they should be increased. It should be that simple, right? It can be a logical suggestion that can come to us. Let's see what has happened to that logical suggestion. Now, the kind of suggestion that popped in our minds, even popped in the Finance Commission minds, and therefore the 14th and 15th Finance Commission recognize this, that the states have less revenue raising power but more responsibilities, and that is why more taxes should be given to them. So the share of taxes in these Finance Commission reports was increased to around 40%, which meant that the total taxes that are collected by both governments, over 40% of those taxes should go to the state governments. But this was in theory or in the reports of the Finance Commission. The reality suggests that even after suggesting that over 40% of the taxes should go to the state, this has not resulted into implementation, where the actual share never reached this mandated level. After reaching a peak of 36.6% in financial year 19, states' share fell and has since stagnated around 29%. So this is also a matter of concern, where even in theory or on paper the Finance Commission said that more revenue of the taxes should be given to states. In reality, only 36.6% in year 2019, and since then only 29% of the total taxes is being devolved to the state governments. So this is also a crucial point of data that comes for us to see as to what is the status of devolution of these taxes. So as this graph suggests, these are the level of devolution that is done, and this is the state share recommended by Finance Commission. So where this was 41% in the latest 15th Finance Commission report, the actual allocation which was done was only 29.6% of the total share of the taxes that was stipulated by the Finance Commission. So this becomes our second data. Then let's come to the fact of how is the both governments, that is the central and state governments, pace of collecting revenue has gone up. So even though the Finance Commission raised the state's share in the central taxes, it didn't translate into an increase in the actual share devolved as the divisible pool shrank, right? This is something which we're able to see. So as the graph is suggesting, the center's share in the taxes is continuously growing, but the state's share in the taxes, in the divisible pool of taxes, is not growing and is in fact decreasing. That is why this is also a sign of worry, where the intended benefit or the divisible pool of taxes, the share that should go to the states, that is not going. Then the other state of data suggests is about the cesses and surcharge which are levied by the center. Now what are cesses and surcharge? So we have a thing called tax, which means that any product that we buy can be levied indirect tax on it, and something known as income tax is a type of direct tax which is levied on the incomes that people earn. These are the taxes that are levied on either in an indirect way, on a direct way. But additionally, certain additional amount can also be charged by the central government. This additional amount of tax is known as cess and surcharge. So we might have heard about the Swachh Bharat cess or a surcharge on some scheme. So these cess or surcharge are, we can say, an additional form of tax, but they are different from tax, where these are collected by the union government additionally over and above the taxes, but are not shared with the states. So these are distinct instruments of collecting amounts from the citizens, which the central government is not liable to share with the state governments. So it is seen the data points out that the share of cess and surcharge collected by the central government has ever increased, which would mean that the power of center to raise money, the center's share of revenue is continuously increasing because of levying cess and surcharge, but since they do not have to share it with the state's equal share is not increasing. So this is where the graph points out that in the year 2004 to 5, 11.5% was the share of cess and surcharge that used to be levied. But in the year 2020 and 2021, that share of cess and surcharge has reached to 19.9%. So it shows that there has been a drastic increase of levy of this cess and surcharge. And since this does not have to be shared with the states, again the states would not get this increased amount. So the next data points out certain irregularities with this cess and surcharge, which means that, as I said right now, these cess and surcharges are to be collected by the center and they are not to be shared with the states. But these cess and surcharge are collected for a specific purpose. As I said, the Swachh Bharat cess would be collected specifically to supplement the scheme of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. So all the cleanliness and sanitation activities that are going on, the cess amount will go to the intended account of that particular scheme. But the CAG report has highlighted that many a times it has been found out that the intended benefit or the intended place that the surcharge or cess amount which it should have gone to, that it has not gone, which says that in the financial year 19, it said that around 414 crore were collected from abolished cesses, that is cesses subsumed under the GST and deposited in the Consolidated Fund of India. In another report, the CAG pointed out that 8,871 crore were collected from the social welfare surcharge on customs. So on the customs duty, this was an additional surcharge known as the social welfare surcharge levied. However, no dedicated fund was created to ensure that the amount was spent for the intended purpose. What this meant was that the surcharge was collected, but it is not known whether it was sent to a dedicated fund and it was really used to the intended purpose of social welfare activities. Then the CAG points out that cesses worth 1.1 lakh crore or 40% of the cesses were not transferred to the reserve funds and were retained by the Consolidated Fund of India. So in this way, the CAG pointed out that there are stringent irregularities with respect to collection of these cesses and surcharges, but their intended use of their benefit, that the benefit should have gone to either the dedicated fund set up for this cess and surcharge or utilization of this cess and surcharge for the intended scheme or objective that was they were levied for. So this is an important critical information that the data points out. So this was the data with respect to the article. What do we get to see from here? We get to see important data points which shows the reality of financial relations between the center and the states. And therefore, when the states are coming to the center and saying that they are facing fiscal problems, they are facing problems of less revenues and more responsibilities with respect to implementation works, this becomes a body of evidence to support their argument. So this is the discussion with respect to this article, and with this let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, "Tomato flu detected among children in India," says Lancet. Now each week we are seeing a new disease springing up in the country, and the new entrant to the list today is tomato flu. Now what is tomato flu? It has been found out that in the states of Kerala, Odisha and Tamil Nadu, a new disease, a viral disease has been encountered known as the tomato flu, which is a rare contagious disease of viral nature in humans whose origins are not yet known. So what is this disease? We'll study about it from the examination point of view, and it becomes important for us from the point of view of science tech in GS3 and also the general science perspective which comes in the prelims examination. So what is this tomato fever or tomato flu? It is a non-life-threatening virus disease. So as I said, it was first identified in the Kollam district of Kerala on May 6th, and as of July 26th, more than 82 children younger than 5 had been reported with the infection by government hospitals in Kerala. And apart from Kerala, the diseases have also spread to states of Tamil Nadu and Odisha. So apart from these 3 states, this disease, tomato fever, has not been encountered or seen in any other state, and only is currently restricted to these 3 states. Then, however, the medical experts have opined that it might be an after effect of dengue or chikungunya. So these are all vector-borne diseases caused by mosquitoes, be that malaria, dengue or chikungunya. So this tomato fever is being said that it is a viral disease, but it is quite similar to the disease of chikungunya, where the patients feel high fever, pain in the joints, right? These kind of symptoms. So it's said that it's similar to the disease of chikungunya, and it gets its name from the tomato-shaped red rashes that it causes on the body of the infected individuals. And this flu is said to affect children below 5 years of age, and that is why this has become a cause of worry, that it is affecting the children below 5 years of age, and it is also a contagious disease, which means that it can spread from one human to another. So what are the different symptoms that are encountered when tomato fever is concerned? So the major symptoms in tomato fever include, since it is similar to chikungunya disease, all the chikungunya symptoms, that of high fever, rashes, intense pain in the joints, are also the symptoms in tomato fever. Then, since it's also a viral disease, all the influenza disease symptoms which are seen, such as COVID or other influenza, where we face fatigue, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, all of these symptoms which are influenza symptoms are also seen in the tomato fever. And additionally, dehydration and swelling of joints and other common influenza like symptoms are also seen in tomato fever. So these are the symptoms. Then what about the treatment? So since this is a very rare disease and not very fatal, it is a contagious disease, but not a very fatal one and a self-limiting one, and so that is why the line of treatment is also not very specific for it, and normal medicines for the disease can be given, where if there is fever, normal fever reducing medicines can be given, and the primary mode of relief is therefore isolation, rest and plenty of fluids to counter the dehydration which is encountered in this fever. Then the symptoms vanish over time on their own with medicinal support, with normal medicinal support that can be given for fever and diarrhea and other symptoms. And therefore utensils, clothes and other items used by the infected persons must be sanitized to prevent the flu from spreading. This precaution must be taken when it comes to spreading of the contagious diseases, of which tomato fever is one. So this was our discussion with respect to tomato fever and the important pointers that we need to take care of with respect to the examination. With this, let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, "Loan defaulters, entities under probe need NOC to invest overseas." Now this article pertains to a new set of regulations brought out by the RBI or the government, which would be dealt by or handled by the RBI under the Foreign Exchange Management Act. So what are these new regulations? These new regulations are known as Overseas Investment Rules and Regulations, notified under the Foreign Exchange Management Act, right? So these new rules and regulations, as we can see from the wording, Overseas Investment Rules. So this takes care of the provisions of how the resident Indians, that people like us and the body corporates, can make investments overseas. So what should be the rules for resident Indians overseas, residing in India but wanting to invest outside India? So these rules will take care of these particular provisions. So it is aimed at fulfilling a dual objective, that is making it easier for domestic corporates to invest abroad. So it is to ease their facilities for investing abroad, while at the same time making it tougher for the loan defaulters and others being probed by the investigative agencies and regulators to shift fund out of the country. what happens is with economic offenders, as we have seen with, for example, with respect to Vijay Mallya or other such people, it is seen that whenever it is seen that an economic crime is or a case is going to be instituted against them, a lot of their funds are shifted outside the country and the government does not have any control over it. So these regulations are going to make it tough for these defaulters of their loans to shift their funds outside the country. So this is the dual objective which these overseas investment rules and regulations, which would be under the Parliamentary Act of Foreign Exchange Management Act and will be administered by the Reserve Bank of India. So what are the major provisions of these rules? The first major provision for the easing of the investment is that no Indian resident shall be allowed to make investments into foreign entities that are engaged in real estate activity, gambling in any form, and dealing with financial products linked to the Indian rupee would require the central bank's specific approval. So which means that apart from these fields, Indian residents are allowed to invest in whatever form and field they want. But when these fields are concerned, that is real estate activity, gambling in any form, or dealing with financial products which are linked to the Indian rupee, these activities which would require RBI's specific primary approval. So only after the RBI's approval can the Indian residents make investments in these fields. And as for the second objective, that is making difficult of the shifting of funds, to make it difficult for bank defaulters and fraudsters to acquire assets abroad, often as a precursor to leaving the country, the new rules mandate they secure a NOC, or what we call the no objection certificate, from their lender or concerned regulators and investigative agencies before making any financial commitment. So to stop them from shifting funds, the regulations have incorporated a tool of no objection certificate or NOC, which would mean that before carrying out any such transaction, they would need the permission or no objection certificate from either the regulators or the investigative agency which are carrying an investigation against them. And there is a 60-day deadline for these agencies, which means that within 60 days, these agencies or bodies need to give their approval or their no objection certificate. And if within 16 days the NOC is not given, it would be assumed that the NOC shall be granted to this individual. So these are the major provisions of the overseas investment rules and regulations under the FEMA Act. So this comes to an end. Our discussion comes to an end over here. So we stop here and we'll meet again tomorrow with the important articles from the newspaper. Thank you.